Okay, good morning to everybody. Today we will be discussing another important issue with world religions, namely religion and women. So far we discussed many theoretical aspects of religion, such as concept of God, and then the arguments to prove the existence of God and things like that. I thought there are many other important and interesting issues to be discussed with regard to religion, but we don't have that much time left. So I thought as our sort of last the theme to discuss, I will discuss this issue of religion and women. I will try to briefly explain to you first why do we have to discuss this particular subject specifically. Now, the founders of all the world religions are men. Religions have originated from ancient societies which were mostly male dominated. In these societies, it is men who had access to education, who had time for academic, scholarly and religious pursuits, and who had the power and authority in society. In these societies, women were secondary to men and were confined to the domestic roles. Thus, it is natural that in such situations, men were the religious teachers, as in all other fields of human interest. Now, one important thing is when we look at religions, all religions have been advocated by men and originated from men. Now, why? What is the reason? And also when you look at history of all the religions, you can also see how the women have been treated by the male society. Now, it is a kind of very interesting thing, because when you look at the human race, human beings, there are only two categories, right? Basically men and women. Of course, there can be, in between categories, very minorities, but if we forget those things, basically society is men and women. Now, why do we have to consider this aspect of women as something very different or very strange or something to be discussed specifically? In a way, it looks odd. But on the other hand, if you look at the human history, you can see that history up to, I would say, this point, basically a male-dominated society where men have been dictating terms. Now, this is the very overall general state of affairs in the world. Now, even today, we know that women's organizations, women's liberation movements started, say for example, in countries like England for 200 years ago, end of 18th century and then 19th century. And then, of course, in the 20th century, we had women's liberation movements, women talking about these issues. World is, change in that sense, many respects. But still then you can see that in the world, many countries, many societies are not ready really accept women as maybe leaders, women as religious leaders, political leaders. It is not very easy. Now, certain situations are fairly strange. Now, if you look at Asian countries, in Western countries, there is a perception that in Asian countries, women are highly suppressed and, they don't have freedom and, things like that. But if you look at the world history, in Europe and in the West and in America, the situation has been not really much different, or even in some respect it is worse. So now, for example, in early 1960s, one Mrs. Rimau Bandaranaike became the first prime minister of a country in the world, that is in Sri Lanka. Then people couldn't believe that. But then, of course, different countries have different, the ways of perceiving things and doing things. Now, Sri Lanka, a woman became first prime minister in the world, not because, the Sri Lankan men are so liberal-minded and, open-minded, not because of that. In Asian countries, sometimes, the more than gender, there are other factors that are working. Now, the main reason why this lady became prime minister was because her husband was the prime minister and he was assassinated by a gunman. And so the lot of sympathy came because of that. And then Mr. Bandaranaike was very, he was a popular leader. So that paved the way. So it was a more political thing. But of course, later she proved that. Of course, she had the only high school education. But then under her, she was controlling all the great economics and political scientists and everybody. She proved to be a very hardy woman. So, but that is of course subsequently. People didn't appoint her knowing all these things. She was barely a housewife in a rich family. That was the only, but the family was. Now, if you look at from that point of view, not only Sri Lanka, many South Asian countries like India produced, and then Pakistan, Bangladesh, all these countries produce women presidents or prime ministers. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that on the other hand, all the gender discriminations are gone from these societies. But on the other hand, now even up to now you can say United States is not ready to have a woman president. Something that came very close to was Hillary Clinton, but still she was not selected. So this is the situation in the West, in some places. So I don't think this can be explained really with reference to gender alone. But if you look at particularly the Asian societies where the Buddhism practiced, with the Buddhist background, you can see that, of course, women were always, everywhere in the world, in the pre-modern world, the women were secondary. There is no doubt about that. But then even though women were secondary, in many Buddhist countries, the situation of women was fairly, quality-wise, much better than in many other, even Western societies. Like initially people in the European countries had to fight for universal franchise because they were not, But then again, in some of these societies up to 60s, 70s, women were not allowed to have property. Women were not allowed to have a credit card. So, like that, there were many restrictions like that. But in Buddhist societies, women always had their property rights. So, but on the other hand, if you compare with, Middle Eastern countries or Islamic cultures, you can see that the situation is different. But anyhow, interesting thing is when you, think about religion, and then how religion has treated woman, and what is her role in religion, what is her status in religion. These are some of the interesting questions. Now, very often, in the Buddhist tradition, we look at from one point of view. In the Christian tradition, they look at from another point of view. And Islamic tradition, they have some other considerations. But while overallly, in an overall manner, anywhere in the world, women were secondary to men, we can see that in where Buddhism has been the traditional religion, the situation is sometimes better than, in some of these other societies. So that we will see in the course of, this discussion. Now, since women were considered limited in their intellectual capacity, they were not considered as capable of abstract thinking, which religion and the higher attainments which religion aims at required. Now, if you look at society, you can see that historically it has been the case that women were kept without education, right? So usually it is only men had access to education. Now, when a group of people does not have access to education, and their ability to think becomes limited. Now, from generation to generation, when women were not allowed to education, and then as a result, you are not part of intellectual discussions, intellectual pursuits, then you are not the teacher, you are not the writers of books. So, gradually you can see that they were reduced to very minor roles. Okay, they were reduced to very minor roles. Now, as a result, you can see that in society, there is a belief that women are, the less intelligent. Okay, and then, of course, that perception comes as a result of historical evolution. And then, when you believe that women are less intelligent, then they are not given, they are deprived of the opportunities. So, it goes like a circle. One causing the other. So, on the one hand, society keeps them in that way, and then the tradition goes on. So, you have this going on everywhere in the world. So, the societies went to secondary. And then they were confined to the domestic roles. Now, thus it is natural that in such situations, men were the religious teachers, as in all other fields of human interest. So, you can see, this is going on in society. Consequently, in a discussion on religion and women, it is important to focus on the status and the role of women in religion. Some features common to all religions in relation to women are elevating the status of men over that of women, stricter sanctions against women, promoting submission of women to men. Now, these, I would say, are common to all religions. Elevating the status of men over that of women. So, the man's status is higher than that of woman. The stricter sanctions against women. Now, women have more rules, more things to be done and not to be done. And then promoting submission of women to men, and then submission of women to men is given as a virtue, So it is a part of the good behavior. It is a part of the good behavior that you don't talk loudly, you don't laugh loudly. Now these are given as the good part of the good behavior. Now in some cultures, for example in Japanese culture, very often you see when women talk, they just the cover their mouth with their fingers, like they, it's not because they can't shout or something, but socially it is not acceptable. So even though they say something, they would don't want to share their mouth, and then talking loudly, laughing loudly is considered to be quite unbecoming of a woman. Now, in many cultures, in Asian cultures, you have this much more. Now, the contemporary feminists have been active to gain equality of status for women within religions. The hierarchy in religions have been male-dominated all the time. The feminists have noted the suppression of women in religion, consequently have emphasized the need for equality and freedom within religion. Now, one worldwide movement is this feminist movement in the world, which started in England and European countries around 200 years ago, and then they were fighting with the system in order to get the equality. They were not initially fighting with religion. Of course, religion is one important aspect where gender differences are maintained. But, they were fighting for equal status, equal pay, and also the equal opportunities in society. For these things they have been fighting. And then, they have won, many things as a result. And, then universal franchise where both men and women both can vote. And, like that. Now, in the ancient Greece, we know that the democracy started in Greece, in Athens, the cities like Athens. But although democracy started, that democracy did not include women and slaves. It is only men. So the democracy did not include women. They did not have voting power. So, that was the many societies. Now in India we talk about Vajji, Malla and all these what we consider to be Republican type societies. But again, it was the Republican type of men. But not we are not told that in the Vajji and in all these societies women were also included. No, women were not the rulers. So, you can see that going out and doing things, politics, trade, and, all these things very much for men. So, in Indian society, you can see that, the situation is, really. Now, contemporary feminists have been active to gain equality. Now, religion is one very important aspect in this regard, because religion is accepted by many and then respected by many. If you give a religious reason to keep, as religious reason for anything, that can be a powerful reason, because religion is respected by people, okay? That can be. Now, there are in the religions the grounds given to keep women lower than men. There are religious reasons, okay? Now, that is something very interesting, because in other words, we can see that religion has also become, the one important aspect where these differences between men and women are, they emphasized and, kept alive. So, that sense, the feminist, the movements, with regard to religion have been also very interesting. There are lots of developments in this area, how to interpret religion, how to understand religion, how to interpret the religious text, and also organizationally, they include women within the religious fold. We will talk a little bit about Buddhism in the course of this discussion. So the feminists have noted the suppression of women in religions. Okay, so it's also part of the feminist movement. Now we will move on to Indian religion from here. In Indian religions, Hinduism, Jainism and Buddhism, women are considered as, now these are general things, they are considered as weak-minded, deceptive, fickle, treacherous, and except in Buddhism also as impure. Impure means unclean. Unclean. So these are common to all Indian religions. If you look at Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism, in all three religions, we can see that this is the general description. Of course, there are exceptions. There are differences in emphasis, and there are reasons. But basically, these characteristics are found in religious literature. In Hinduism, although there are such powerful female deities like Kali, Durga, and Shakti, the state of the ordinary woman is very low. They are kept under the authority of the husband, confined to domestic chores and childbearing. Hinduism famously says that women do not need any specific religious rite other than serving their husband faithfully to be born in heaven. So this is Hinduism equally famously holds that a woman must never be allowed to be independent at any stage of her life. At the childhood, she must be under the protection of the father, in the youth, under the husband, and if the husband departs before her, she must be under the protection of her son. So, these are some of the very well-known Hindu traditions. Now, in Hinduism, both men and women were not allowed to do religious service together. I mean, basically it is basically men and then women after, or women separately. So that is, that has been there. Of course, it is, changed, in some instances now, but basically this is the general pattern. So now if you look at the Indian society, you can see this, the gender discrimination is, it's a good case example. It's a good case example. Now, the Hinduism famously says that women do not need any specific religious rite other than serving her husband faithfully to be born in heaven. So while men have to perform religious rites, women don't need anything. You just look after your husband very well and faithfully, that will be enough for you to be born in heaven. Now, the Hindu texts are very clear that whatever your husband is, he can be a drunkard, he can be a bad person, but doesn't matter. You really have to obey and, pay respect to him and, take care of him. Now, basically, women were considered to be childbearers. And particularly in the Hindu belief, they think that in order for them to offer what is called Shraddha, that is the offering given after the death for the departed people. In Hinduism, you have to have a son to do that. So in the absence of a son, it is very cumbersome to do that. Of course, a daughter can do that, but that is not the optimum way. So you have to have a son in order to do that offering when you are dead. So if you die without a son, then you are helpless, in the next world. So, this is a very powerful reason. So having a son is the very important thing. Now, if you bring a woman to your family, then, I mean, in order for her to be in a state of authority or state of acceptability, the most important thing is that she has to produce a son. Now, if she doesn't produce a son, of course, daughters are not accepted. Daughters are not accepted. Now, this tradition is very ancient. In the Kosala Sanyutta, you have this story, right? When Queen Mallika had a daughter, king was upset. Now, he came to see the Buddha. Buddha said, don't get upset. A girl child can be very intelligent and very good, and also she can give birth to a son who will be very good. Now, actually, what the Buddha is saying is something like this. What the Buddha is saying is, don't worry. Now, if you don't have a son, you will have a grandson, because your daughter can give birth to a child. I mean, son. So Buddha doesn't directly say that, but it looks like Buddha saying that, okay, so your queen gave birth to a girl, that's fine. She will give birth to a son, so you will have a grandson, something like that. Now, Kosala's story is very typical. Women were not welcomed, women children were not welcomed. And also, there are cases. Now, both this is in China, it was rampant, but India also, women were, the women children were not accepted. Now, in India is one country where, they do it now those days, of course, you don't have all these tests and everything. So, moment the woman child is born, strangled or, thrown away or something like that. But today now, with the medical knowledge and scientific knowledge, things are very different. In the conception within 1 or 2 months, you can really know, do a test and, ultrasound test, and you can know whether the child is girl or boy. Now, if the child is girl, so they abort. So the India is, one of the, the biggest, it's a huge country anyway. The number of abortions are so much. The reason is, now I remember I went to one of these very well-known hospitals in India. At the very entrance, they say that we do not do ultrasound pregnancy test because, it is so notorious. Everybody wants to know whether it is a girl or a boy. So if it is a girl, it is aborted. But, we know that it's totally irrational because your wife is a woman who is going to give birth. Now, suppose you get rid of all the women, then what? Right? But then, it is not a problem of rationality or being rational or irrational. But simply people think that, you have to have, the son. So at least in India, there is a reason for that. Now, reason is a religious reason. So in order to offer Shraddha, when you are dead, when you are in the Pitru Loka, world of fathers, you have to have a son. So it is connected with religion. But on the other hand, in the Indian tradition, having a daughter is expensive thing. Because, you have to educate, and then even though whether you educate or not, when you give in a marriage, you have to give a dowry. Now, that dowry can be dependent on according to the family. Very often, some families, it is a motorcycle. You have to give to the husband, or a car, or, whatever, depending on. Now, in India, you hear a lot of young women are, the cause of death is, when they are working in the kitchen, their sari, their dress gets on fire, because they are wearing a sari. Sari is, a lot of clothes. So, if you get on fire. Now, there are frequent cases of women dying with, this fire. Actually, that is not natural. Of course, they die with fire, but it is not like when they are working in the kitchen and carelessly they contact fire. No, they are set on fire. And then, but then the newspapers and the public, she got caught in the fire and she died. But the actual truth is, in many cases, is purposively That woman, maybe the reason is this: you are given in marriage with the promise of dowry. But after the marriage, dowry doesn't come. Because in the Indian tradition, the woman always comes to the man's place. Now when you come to your husband's place, your husband's mother is there, your husband's sister is there. So, this poor woman is brought into this situation where, all the other women are there. So, life can be very, very miserable. Now, in such a situation, Indian tradition, if your husband dies, that is considered to be your man died because of this woman is so unfortunate and, so unlucky person. So again, the blame goes to the woman. And then in the ancient tradition, of course, the British government, I think towards the end of 18th century, they banned it. So there was this custom. I don't know how much widespread it was. I don't think it was very widespread. But women to perform what is called sati puja. Sati puja means when your husband's body is cremated, you also jump into that fire. But actually speaking, in certain families, that choice could be a better choice. Rather than living with when your husband is dead, you can't live with that family. Because you will be cursed and you will be, because, this man died because of this woman's unluckiness and, so it will be a very, very, the unpleasant, unfortunate situation. So if a woman dies really by performing Sati Puja, then, she becomes sacred. That also is there. But if she were to live, and then in the classical Indian tradition, which is still being practiced, is called, the text is called Manusmruti. So according to Manusmruti, okay, here there is one. This is the most famous, this is translated into English as Manu's law. Manu is the author's name. Manu Smruti. Smruti is, the particular literature. So Manu Smruti. Now, Manu Smruti contains quite a lot of things about, the Indian religious situation. And then, according to Manu Smruti, if your husband dies before you, you have to be a widow for your whole life. You can't get married. And however, if the woman dies before the man can get married. So, the situation is the man can bring another wife. And also, if your woman was unable to produce a son, then again man can divorce the woman. But there are no reasons for a woman to divorce the man. And again, in the ancient tradition, if you don't have children, woman is always at fault. But today with scientific knowledge, we know that sometimes men don't have children, right? Not the woman. But of course, credit or blame, whatever, always goes to the woman. So, and then for some reason, if your husband dies. I remember several years ago, there was a very interesting movie came. The name of the movie is Water. Actually, they could not film that movie in India. They came to Sri Lanka to film it. So it was, although Indian story, filmed in Sri Lanka. The name of the movie is Water. If you can watch it, I think it's now about more than around 10 years or something. But beautiful movie. The story is, this very young girl, about 13 or 14, given in marriage to an old man. Man dies. And then when she was like 13, 14, she is already widow. Now, the whole story is there's a separate place for this kind of widows. All the women whose husbands are dead, they are in there. But what they do for living is some of them become prostitutes and all kinds of, it's a very, very interesting story. And then this state was there in India up to about 1930s, last century. And then it was, I think, outlawed by, again, British colonial government. Now, these are the situations. So the Manusmriti has, many restrictions, and also not only it says that a woman doesn't need any specific yaga or yajna in order to attain heaven. Just looking after your husband is enough. And in the same manner, it very famously says, Na stri swatantriya marhati. A woman should not be given independence. Swatantriya, independence. And it says, a woman should be protected by her father when she is young. And then by her husband when she is married. And if the husband dies, by her elderly son. And then it says, at any stage of life, a woman must not be given independence. Now, this again is, a very interesting thing. Because they did not think that a woman deserves to be working on her own. So it is always under the protection and guidance of man. Now, of course, there are two sides to this picture. Now, one positive side is in the Indian culture, women are protected by men. Of course, you are under your father, but at the same time it means that your father protects you. And you are under your husband, but your husband protects you. And the same manner, that Indian families, brothers have very big responsibility for their sisters. If their sister is, ridiculed by some other boy or something, it is always brothers who go and fight and get hammered and, all these things. Poor fellows. But, the culture makes them, because you can't be silent if your sister is being ridiculed by somebody, right? If somebody says a story about your sister, you have to go and fight, protect. So, the men have that responsibility. So, both negative and positive. Negatively, of course, the woman is always under the man. Okay. Now, in Indian and, even Sri Lankan culture, now, disappearing, the woman goes out and she even has some smaller boy or somebody with her. But small child boy cannot do much, but still, woman feels protected, And then, particularly, so the protection aspect is the positive thing in Indian culture. But then on the other hand, reality is that, woman is always under a man. So, this is basically the situation. And then now, lack of education came as a social thing. But then what happens is, when you go on for generations, women become very, very naive, very superficial, because, they can't think about anything deeper. Because the purpose of education is really, much wider world is open to you, so, you can think about issues. But in this particular case, women are not open to that. I mean, the doors have been closed. As a result, they become very, very limited in their capacity. Now, then when they are perceived as limited in their capacity, of course, other opportunities are also being lost. So, this is basically the situation. Okay, so the famously holds that women must never be allowed to be independent. Even though a man can remarry after his wife's death, the woman is not allowed to do so. There was a tradition called Sati Puja, sacrificing one's life, funeral pyre of the husband. If the husband dies before her, woman is bound to be extremely miserable. Okay, now this is basically the situation in Hinduism. And not only that, actually, most of these religions, particularly Hinduism and also Jainism, we can see the woman is considered also to be physically unclean, at least on certain days. That's also across religions. So as a result, even on the one hand, women are restricted from religion, but on the other hand, in certain days, the women are not allowed to go into the religious places. So, this physical concept of physical uncleanliness is something very important. Now, again, this is a very interesting feature in Buddhism. According to Buddhism, the interesting thing is not only women, men and women all are unclean, isn't it? What is asubha? Asubha bhavana? Asubha bhavana is not for women or men, right? Asubha means you have your 32 things. I mean, it doesn't have a gender. Have you noticed that? Now, some people think that, Asubha Bhavana is, it's for women or something. No, nothing like that. Actually, it's a generally human body. Okay? Now, these 32 things, of course, your 32 things are in one body. It looks okay. Your nails are beautiful and, your eyes are nice and, all that. But, the Asubha Bhavana is not like that. You put these 32 things separately in 32 things. Then, of course, they don't appear very interesting. Right? So, Asubha Bhavana in Buddhism doesn't have man nor woman. Okay? But actually, but on the other hand, compared to Hinduism or Jainism, Buddhism doesn't have much of a concept of physical uncleanness of women. But not that it is not there. It is, even in Buddhism it is there, but the important thing is in the Buddhist tradition, nowhere in the country, the women don't have dates that they can't go to the temple or to the vihara. So in Buddhist religiosity, it was never considered. So, because if the woman has, certain physical thing, it is the woman's thing. Men don't have to worry about it. Okay, women will take care of it. So the Buddhist tradition is that, the Buddhism doesn't consider there are good days or bad days. Now for the Buddhist temple, Buddhist vihara, pagoda, I mean, men and women can go anytime, any day, right? But it is not the case with Hindu religious place. It's not the case with even Jainism, okay? So, across religions you have these physical taboos. So the Buddhism really looked at as I said, I mean, half jokingly, but it's not really a joke. Buddhism looks at the whole human body to be. So whether it is a man or woman, it is asubha. So, it doesn't really, they make very much of a big difference. But on the other hand, physical cleanliness is a little bit bigger challenge for a woman. We know that. Now, more recently, up to very recent time, like in India, there is one single man who was fighting to make available, the pads and diapers for these women in the cheap price. And that man did the whole countrywide this thing. Because, the story says that, of course, it is a very recent incident. So this man had a campaign, but he succeeded. Because, the lower the prices of, these sanitary, the clothes. Now, you can see that. So, it can be a physically challenging thing for a woman more than a man. But that has nothing to do, according to Buddhism, with your intellectual capacity or anything like that, okay? Because men and women's bodies are different, physical bodies are different, so the needs can be different. But, that is not considered to be a reason to discriminate against them. So it is something, very important how, the religion looks at. So, basically in the Indian Brahmanic tradition, they wanted to keep this distinction and, maintain it. Now, according to Jainism, a man is born a woman as a result of bad behavior. A woman can be born as a man if she lives a good life without deception. Now, it's very interesting. Being born as a woman is considered to be a result of bad karma. Okay? And also, it is said that if you become a woman behaves well, then she can become a man as a result. Now, again, you can see that in the ancient societies, because of the social condition, to be born as a woman is a very miserable thing, because you have to do all the household chores and cleaning and childbearing, and bearing a child and giving birth to a child is something very, very serious thing. The women, in many countries, so many children die at childbirth, and so many women, mothers also die at childbirth, So it is, those are. And in one of the discourse, Buddha says that women have 5 additional troubles. They have to go for marriage in very early childhood, and they have the monthly, the periods, and then they have to give birth to children. And so these are basically the physical and social things. They have to please their husband, and they have to be in their husband's family. So like that, there are social, and also there are physical. Physical things are like childbirth, bearing child, giving birth to child, and all these physical things. Now, particularly when the society is not developed, these things were very, very difficult, dangerous things. So the man does not have these, the problems or these challenges, and the woman has to face these challenges. So therefore, particularly in the ancient tradition, the people thought that to be born as a man is a good thing. So religions particularly seem to be saying that to be born as a man is the good thing. To be born as a woman is not a good thing. So that comes basically because of the situation in the society. But today, in many places, many countries in the world, maybe to be born as a woman is even better. Because, when you look at the social situations and, the kind of recognition women get, of course, although not everywhere. For example, in a country like United States, suppose you go for a job interview, both have same qualifications, very likely the job can go to the woman. Because, simply she is woman. The argument is that, women have been deprived of these things for a long time. To compensate it, they must be given more opportunities. So we can argue that in the 20th and 21st century, in many places, to be born as a woman is a good result, good karma. not really to be born as a man. But, it depends on social conditions, so anyhow, according to Jainism. Digambaras hold that a woman cannot attain liberation. She has to be born as a man to achieve liberation. Svetambaras believe that women can attain liberation. Now, if you look at Buddhism and Jainism, we had a discussion on Jainism, and then according to Jainism, that they have Digambaras and Svetambaras. Digambaras are more strict group of people who hold that woman cannot attain liberation. Now again, this idea is that, women are limited. So there are certain, I think the idea is based also in the physical condition. She has to be born as a man to achieve liberation. Svetambaras believe that women cannot achieve liberation. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, one very important thing is the woman and man can become, both can become arahant. But in the Jaina tradition, they call it siddha. That is like, becoming an arahant, but, you can't become, they become an siddha according to Jaina Digambara view, although Shvetambaras believe that. Now in Jainism, women form an important part as nuns, samani, and householders who support monks and nuns. In particular, Jaina household women are very important for welfare of monastic community, because it is the duty of women to prepare the meals of the monastics in accordance with various dietary rules and restrictions. Now, that the Jaina monastics have lot of dietary restrictions. Even, I mean, they are vegetarians, complete vegetarians, but even the vegetables, there are ways to cook. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, among the monks, there is this tradition of, the kappiya. Like, when you have certain uncooked things with seeds, you have to cut the seeds, right? That tradition is there. But of course, in Buddhist tradition, it's a symbolic thing, right? Because you don't cut all the seeds, but you just symbolically say that, okay, it is proper. But in Jainism, they take it even more seriously. Maybe perhaps this custom came to Buddhism through Jainism, because Jainas do not eat seeds. And then we have Bijagama, Mulagama, Patabhyataya, Pachityam, right? So if you cut and these things, you become guilty of minor offense. But in the Jain tradition, you can see that they are very concerned. So like in Buddhist tradition, Jaina tradition has bhikkhu, bhikkhuni, or samani, and then upasaka, upasika in the sense, I'm not sure whether they are using the same terms, but male and female householders. So all four groups are there. And then particularly women have an important role, because it is women who should prepare the meals for the Jaina monks according to these rules and regulations. In other words, Jaina monks cannot accept food from any and everybody. They have to make sure that, food is prepared according to their requirements. As I said when I was discussing Jainism with you, there are lots of things that Jaina and Buddhism seem to be silently, responding to each other, reacting. Now, for example, in the Buddhist tradition, when you go for Pindapata, you have to go you can't skip houses, right? Thinking that whether this is Buddhist, non-Buddhist, or whatever. Because the whole idea is, you just go. It's called sapadana charikam, like, you go. But then in the Jaina tradition, no, you can't do that, because, you have to make sure that your food is prepared according to, these are some of the reasons why Jainas have been, confined to, in one locality. In Jaina monasticism, nuns have stricter rules and they are subordinate to monks all the time. For instance, a Jaina nun, however much she is senior in her monastic life, should pay respect to the youngest member of the male monastic order. Now, it's interesting. In Jaina monasticism, nuns have stricter rules. They are subordinate to monks all the time. For instance, a Jaina nun, however much she is senior in her monastic life, should pay respect to the youngest member of the male monastic order. Now, you are familiar with this, because in Attagaru Dhamma, the very first is this. You remember? So now this is the same with the Buddhist monastic tradition too. So even if a bhikkhuni is 120 years, she has to pay respect to bhikkhu who is upasampanna that same day. Now this is one of the Atta Garudhamma in the bhikkhuni sasana, bhikkhuni sangha. When Buddha gave this condition, initially, of course, Mahapajapati Gautami accepted, and then she asked Venerable Ananda to ask the Buddha to change it. Because, when you look at it, you can see that it's not reasonable, right? Because, whether it is a monk or nun, spiritually advanced, why she has to pay homage to a just upasampanna, maybe the person is just 20 years old, So the Mahapajapati Gautami even felt that, that's not fair. So she asked Buddha to change it. But then Buddha's response was, no, how can I do that? Even other religious people don't do it, Buddha says. But who are these other religious people? Actually, it could be Jaina. Because, many traditions came to Buddhism from Jainism. Because we know that Jaina monastic tradition is older than the Buddhist monastic tradition. So Jainas already had this tradition. They were keeping the women under the monastic tradition, the nuns under the monks. So now in the Jaina tradition, it is one of the leading things. Now it is in the Buddhist tradition also, this paying respect in a certain manner is something organizational. Now suppose Buddha said, okay, monks and nuns should pay homage, pay respect according to their age. Now, it will cause extra problems. Like, even in the monastic tradition, sometimes, you have awkward situations. Like, the monks ask, how many vassas, before you pay respect, right? Now, if monks and nuns were, mixed together, then it will be more problematic thing to, they inquire the vassa and, pay respect accordingly. And, but I think this has to be understood more in the society as a social thing. Because when Buddhism started, Buddha started the Bhikkhuni Sasana as, the separate institute, society was very observant and critical. So if we started, certain things very revolutionary, it would have been, very detrimental to the, we will discuss it a little bit when we discuss Buddhism next. So there are social reasons, But anyhow, what happened was, interesting thing in this context is, in the Jaina context is, Buddha says, not even other religious people do that. I mean, in India, apart from Buddhism, the other organized monastic tradition was Jaina. Of course, there were Ajivakas, Paribhajakas, and all these things. On the one hand, we don't have record of them. On the other hand, they don't seem to be such an organized body. Now, if you look at the Buddhist monastic tradition, Vinaya Pitaka, it is highly organized, methodical tradition. So you can see Buddha was responding to Jainas, because Jainas and the Buddhist and, now in the Indian situation, all these people mixed together, went in around, together. So they met in society. So it was interesting, important to, So anyhow, according to Jainism, the distinction was there. Ultimately, a woman has to be a male, a man in order to attain this thing. Okay, we will move on. But before we resume next discussion, do you have any questions or comments? Yes.
Brahmavati story.
Who's?